Hello everybody. Today is a special explanation to address the many concerns global citizens have about China's quote zero COVID end of quote policy, with Shanghai now in the headlines. Pictured above, empty streets in Shanghai, a megalopolis of 25 million souls that usually hums 24/7. This is shocking and fearful for many Westerners, but there are very good reasons, all explained below. All right, here we go. There is a lot of disbelief, scorn, and laughs in the West mainstream media, what I call the big lie propaganda machine, the BLPM, concerning China's draconian, quote, zero COVID, end of quote, policy. Yes, draconian, but fully justified, as I will explain. This ridicule is especially true with conservative, Christian, libertarian, and neoliberal sources, since it offers a chance to attack not only the dreaded yellow peril, but to also foam at the mouth over the country's supposedly totalitarian communism socialism. Of course, the West's ersatz, quote, liberals and progressives, end of quote, love Baba Beijing's authoritarianism, my wry name for the leadership/government. Nevertheless, they enjoy their Orwellian 2 minutes of hate against real communist, socialist Sino-democracy. Recently, Shenzhen had a total lockdown, COVID outbreak, and now Shanghai is going through the grist mill to keep it contained as much as possible. Tens of millions of citizens are inconvenienced, and yes, it is a drag, a big thugging pain in the Sino-keister for everyone involved. I've talked to friends in both cities, and it's no fun, trust me, with daily antigenic tests in red zones, lockdowns in infected apartment blocks, online schooling, and work at home. These two same cannibalizing Western ideological factions had apoplectic fits when Baba Beijing locked down 50 million citizens in Greater Wuhan in 2020. Both sides used the "only China can pull this off" measures to boost their domestic policies, geopolitical and political agendas, and to destroy each other and their economies, damn the citizens. Just look at what red/Trump Republicans did and what blue/Clinton Obama Democrats are pushing now to see what I mean. Westerners have had such elite aristocratic cacocrats for leaders for so long that they have become oblivious, apathetic, and powerless to their awful plight. Be that as it may, there are very obvious explanations for Baba Beijing's zero COVID policy. However, you would never know it without a firm understanding of the Chinese people's 5,000-year history. So let's get started, shall we? The Chinese nation has been relentlessly attacked by outsiders for millennia. China has always been a gigantic target to shoot for. In the China trilogy, there is a photo I took of the Great Wall way out in western Gansu province near the border with Xinjiang province, which was first built around 800 BC. It is no taller than a man and less than a meter thick, yet it satisfied the defense needs against the martial technology of the day, arrows and spears. China has been on the defensive for a long, long time. I have also visited sites where Chinese dynasties were exterminated by foreigners in their conquest of and lust for the fabulous resources and riches to be exploited. Sinoland was such a huge bullseye for outsiders to try to usurp that at the height of the Roman Empire in 200 AD, China had 6 times the landmass and 9 times the people as Rome ruled over. That's big, my friends. Thus, it goes without saying the Chinese people have been developing a self-defensive mindset for thousands of years and continue to do so. They have stuck together through 6 civilizational collapses, the last being in 1911 with the downfall of the Qing dynasty, repelling countless invasions, and during all this time committed genocide only once, by wiping out the ever-attacking Zungar tribe in the 1700s. Westerners sure cannot make that claim. For 3,000 years they have been and continue to practice their 6 E's of racism: expansionism, extermination, expropriation, extraction, enslavement, and evangelism, killing billions of people in the process and stealing trillions in precious resources ongoing. We can also tie zero COVID to 1839, when the Chinese nation reached its historical nadir, not only being defeated by Westerners in the First Opium War, but raped, plundered, and drug enslaved by these same savage, genocidal invaders until communist liberation in 1949. Every modern Chinese leader frames the country's ongoing renaissance and revival on the world stage as starting in 1839, not 1949 or Deng Xiaoping in 1980. If you have not contextualized China's century of humiliation in today's current events, then you need to get up to speed. And not just Western exterminators, but Japanese as well. After conquering and ravaging Manchuria since the turn of the 20th century, Imperial Japan constructed Unit 731 in Harbin, China in 1935, not far from the Russian border, until Mao Zedong led the country's freedom-seeking masses, the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, the Communist Party of China, the CPC, to whip their asses in 1945. The land of the rising sun spent a furious decade exterminating more than 400,000 Chinese citizens. How did they do it? WMD, weapons of mass destruction, bioweapons, germ warfare. The Unit 731 team of microbiologists perfected cultivating a choice list of epidemic bugs: bubonic plague, anthrax, typhoid, cholera, dysentery in large quantities. They infected captured prisoners, and as they were dying in bioagony, they cut them open via vivisection, no painkillers of course, to study their organs, muscles, and then later to be incinerated. This is why the microbiologists did not name them as patients or prisoners. No, they cruelly identified their victims as wood logs to be cut up and burned. No one ever left alive. For thousands of years, the Japanese never behaved like this. Why now? With the 19th century Meiji Restoration's obsession to imitate the West's Industrial Revolution, Imperial Japan also saw what colonial Eurangloland was doing in Latin America, Africa, the rest of Asia, and sadly adopted its 6 E's of racism too. Unit 731 then developed delivery systems for airplanes to fly above populated areas, dropping ceramic and flimsy-walled bombs that burst open on impact so that the thousands of contained fleas, mosquitoes, small rodents, and other vectors could begin to infect people. To spread cholera, the planes would drop WMD biocharges over lakes and streams where drinking water was gathered. Now you know why the Chinese are so maniacal about boiling their water to make tea. Low-level scientists at Unit 731 were caught by the invading Soviet Red Army and faced justice in the 1950 war crime trials in Khabarovsk, Russia. But not the real evil geniuses who made Unit 731 such a genocidal success. No, the director, Shiro Ishii, and his top team were saved from hanging. By whom, you might ask? Why, the United States, of course. Uncle Sam loved what it saw and had billions of mostly dark-skinned enemies around the world to kill. Shiro and company became employees at the U.S. Army's Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is now the world's largest WMD bioweapon production center, bringing along 8,000 microscope slides and tens of thousands of pages of research, plans, and designs. The USA immediately became planet Earth's master of WMD germ warfare. Eager to exterminate millions of communist North Koreans and Chinese, America committed WMD biological attacks in 1951-1952 along the border dividing the two countries using carbon copy technology developed at Unit 731. There is even strong evidence that Shiro and his gang worked on a ship off the coast of South Korea to help prepare the bombs. These attacks failed for two reasons. It was the middle of winter and the infected insects and rodents dropped on both sides of the Yalu River did not survive very long in the sub-freezing temperatures. However, more importantly, after being attacked for 10 years across much of northern China by the Japanese, the people had already become expert at limiting and eventually eradicating WMD biowar outbreaks foisted on them. What you are seeing today with zero COVID has deep roots in the many WMD bioweapon attacks that the Chinese defended themselves against 1935 to 1952. Oh, but you say, that's not true. Snopes, fact-checked, and BuzzFeed say it's all just communist propaganda. I am a co-founder and the curator of the Bioweapon Truth Commission. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time researching its free global online library, abbreviated BWTC-GOL, the largest in the world on the subject, to know the truth. Like so much other censored and fake BLPM psychological warfare, you cannot solve today's headlines without comprehending the West's long history of relentless WMD bio and chemical warfare since World War I and still being perpetrated across the world. In the 1990s, right up to the outbreak of SARS in China in 2003, Harvard University, yes, that great CIA and genocidal war criminal factory, illegally collected hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, no one knows for sure, of Chinese respiratory DNA samples targeting citizens who had a medical history of asthma, bronchitis, pneumonia, and flu. Nor does anyone know where all those swab tubes went, but I know a place in Maryland where they surely ended up. At the time, Baba Beijing was too trusting of the name Harvard, but knows better now. Larry Summers, the Clinton gang's thug in arms, and later the university's president, finally publicly apologized. Don't believe me? Here is the expose. But in the West, who cares? After all, they are just yellow niggers. SARS was patented by Pfizer months before it was used to attack China in 2003. Don't believe me? The paper trail is a kilometer long. SARS was also surely race-specific since it spread nowhere outside China. All that Harvard collected Sino DNA probably had a lot to do with perfecting it against the Han. With a death rate of 10%, luckily SARS had low transmissibility. Even more so, like the Japanese and American exterminators of yesteryear, Baba Beijing knew SARS was a WMD act of war, thereby responding accordingly a la Korean War, greatly limiting mortality, illness, while snuffing it out. Of course, Baba knew what was going on, but could not and cannot today say anything for good reasons. First, the World Health Organization, WHO, was created by the Rockefeller Foundation, sometimes abbreviated RF, which is responsible for the WMD, quote, Spanish, end of quote, flu during World War I. No, it should be called the USA-Kansas flu, where it was started and spread all over the world from Fort Riley, which was a huge rendezvous point to send countless conscripts to the trenches in France and Belgium, along with thousands of local children who were all injected with RF's experimental WMD horse serum fermented meningitis, quote, vaccine, end of quote. 50 to 80 million souls paid the eugenic price. WHO is still controlled by RF, along with the U.S. Center for Disease Control, the CDC, and the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, the latter two which were born out of the U.S. Army and are still firmly under military control. Baba Beijing knows that all these, quote, health, end of quote, entities, along with their European counterparts, are China's mortal enemies whose puppeteers are out to destroy them. In spite of all this, China is forced to, quote, play the geopolitical game, end of quote. If Baba Beijing came forth with all the evidence, it would be derided in Urangloland, that being NATO, EU, the Five Eyes, and Israel, as, quote, communist propaganda, end of quote, thus not believable. This is the same psychological warfare the BLPM is using to deny the U.S.'s 31 WMD bioweapon production centers in Ukraine. It's fake news, since it is the ex-Soviet, quote, commie, end of quote, Russians, showing all the concrete evidence found in these abandoned labs. This is a very effective brainwashing tool of the BLPM. Relentlessly accuse Urangloland's enemies of the very same genocidal Wehrmacht crimes against humanity the West commits non-stop to deflect you from its millennial 6 E's of racism. Sadly, it works like a charm, which is why humanity is in such constant turmoil and suffering, and until you step outside the Great Western Firewall, the GWF, you'll never know. Another reason Baba Beijing cannot go public is for domestic concerns. These are the most heinous of war crimes, targeting its citizens, and they would demand a suitable response. Since China does not develop WMD bioweapons, only protecting themselves from them, that only leaves hot war as a response, which is not in the country's interest. So they suck it up and play along. Again, without knowing all this crucial history and context, the brainwashing BLPM headlines you read and watch every day make no sense, especially concerning Urangloland's many enemies around Earth. Starting in 2017, just as the Trump administration was going full Monty, attacking China with massive tariffs and sanctions on thousands of Chinese entities and citizens, the country was besieged with 3 years of rolling avian flu and swine fever outbreaks. The national flocks and herds were almost totally wiped out, causing tens of billions in economic losses. Their spread did not follow normal epidemiological patterns. Baba Beijing knew these were WMD biowar attacks, and again, to avoid war cries among the masses, they played dumb as to their origins. I even reported on eyewitnesses testifying that sophisticated drones were dropping virus-filled vials over poultry and pig production areas. Then came the big WMD bio-kahuna, COVID. I reported on it until I was blue in the face, creating a massive online library you can access. Baba Beijing knew about the 74 Western patents on SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-2, filed years before it was, quote, discovered, end of quote, via the WMD bioweapon attack by the 300 plus American soldiers who went to Wuhan in October 2019 for the Military World Games. China, Russia, and the USA usually duke it out for the most medals. This time, Uncle Sam did not even gain one gold medal, placing lower than Tunisia, Namibia, and Bulgaria. They were the laughingstock across Chinese social media, being dubbed soy sauce soldiers for their pathetic effort. Why? Because they were not athletes, but WMD, germ warfare, field specialists. If you were Baba Beijing, what would you have done based on all the proven history of WMD biological war crimes having been perpetrated on the people going back to 1935? You would protect the 50 million people who were most immediately at risk and go on a war footing, just like in 1950s Korea. You too would confine and limit people's movement and quickly develop real flu-based vaccines that actually immunize and create antibodies. Most importantly, it must be assumed that all COVIDs in the country are ever-evolving, likely race-based Western WMD bioarm attacks. Thus, every citizen must work individually and collectively on a war basis to defend themselves. Unlike the West's cacocratic governments, Baba Beijing lives by Mao Zedong's eternal mantra of serve the people, which is inscribed in official Chinese documents going back to the Tang Dynasty, 600 to 900 AD, and which we can paraphrase today as serve and protect the people. The truth of the matter is the distribution patterns for China's most recent outbreaks, like Shenzhen and Shanghai, are so abnormal that they are almost certainly being artificially spread. It is very easy to smuggle in vials of WMD germs via unsearchable embassy diplomatic pouch to be planted in public places, not to mention the USA has 60 WMD bioweapon production laboratories along China's and Russia's borders, among its 330 plus scattered across the globe, 31 in Ukraine alone. With much of this territory being unguarded, mountainous, and/or desert no man's land, saboteurs can easily cross the border. You may still be immobilized by cognitive dissonance and denying that your governments are capable of and actively commit WMD war crimes. Trust me, from the bottom of my heart, I can fully and experientially empathize with you. It wasn't until 2010 when I saw a short video clip of the World Trade Center building number 7 collapse in free fall on 9/11 via controlled demolition that my long, painful, shocking, and sometimes tearful, quote, peeling the onion, end of quote, journey to escape outside the GWF could begin, thereby piercing the veil of the Wizard of Oz BLPM. Be that as it may, now do you understand why China considers all epidemics, human or livestock, as acts of Occidental WMD war crimes? Come to think of it, I should rightly make it the 7 E's of Western racism by adding epidemics. Expansionism, extermination, epidemics, expropriation, extraction, enslavement, and evangelism. The West's efforts to destroy the Chinese people have been going on since 1839 and are continuing as I write this, and will keep pushing non-stop until corrupt, evil, and genocidal Urangla is brought to its knees, with its many psychopaths brought to a Nuremberg 2.0 trial, from heads of state to generals, CEOs, and on to agency directors. Good news, this process of justice and compensation for humanity is already happening. This is Jeff J. Brown signing out. Thank you. By the way, of course, there are a bunch of hyperlinks, so be sure to go to the webpage to find them all. Bye-bye. China Rising Radio Sinoland and China Tech News Flash signing out. Please make a contribution to all of my hard work. Thank you.